Colonialism is defined as control by one power over a dependent area or people. It occurs when one nation subjugates another, conquering its population and exploiting it, often while forcing its own language and cultural values upon its people. Slavery was an economic pillar of the ancient Greek and Roman empires. In the 1st century AD, over 1 million people lived in Rome, and a third of them were slaves. According to research in Italy, the number of slaves during the periods in which the empire was at its peak grew to 1.5 million. That's approximately 25% of the Isle's population during that period. The practice of international trading with human beings of any color was firmly entrenched in antiquity. Slavery also exists in early Europe, sub-Saharan Africa, and other regions. However, a connection between race and slavery emerged in the 11th century as Islamic traders shipped North African captives to Arabia, Persia, and other Islamic countries. Slavery in Islamic Africa was from 1400 to 1800. Slavery began on a small scale in the 1500s with the Portuguese considering slaves among Africa's most desirable riches. The Portuguese lost their control over the slave trade to the Dutch in the early 1600s. By 1700, Great Britain took over the primary control of the slave trade, and then gradually it was shared by other European nations. However, it's thought that slavery in these various places never reached the magnitude of human degradation as the slave system of the Americas, called chattel slavery. Chattel slavery means the enslaving and owning of human beings and their offspring as property, able to be bought, sold, and forced to work without wages, as distinguished from other forced, unpaid, or low-wage labor system. It's all slavery. And most black people were slaves laboring on plantations in the South. Yet, around 1619, free blacks migrated from Europe to North America for the same reasons as white and indentured servants. Europeans migrated to the Americas first to obtain profits from the new lands, and then later to escape religious and political persecution. Allegedly, the first recorded Africans in the North American colonies arrived in Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. Now, I say allegedly because in the book, They Came Before Columbus, The African Presence in Ancient America by Ivan van Sertima, he states that early in the 16th century, the Spanish first encountered the New World Negroes, or black people, on an island near Cartagena, Colombia, in South America. Ivan van Sertima's book discusses the relationship between the indigenous people of America and the Africans, such as trade, exchanges in food, culture, and religion thousands of years before Columbus, including the Olmec heads. Now, the Olmec civilization was one of the most influential ancient civilizations of the early Americas. Its dominance of the region faded in the last centuries before the Common Era. Several Olmec sites were considered important centers of activity, of which San Lorenzo and La Venta are the most significant. San Lorenzo, about 56 kilometers, about 35 miles south of the Gulf of Mexico, in the modern Mexican state of Veracruz, was at its height around 1150 to about 900 CE. La Venta, east of San Lorenzo and closer to the Gulf Coast, about 15 kilometers or 9 miles in the modern Mexican state of Tabasco, reached its height in about 900 to about 500 CE. The Olmec civilization is commonly thought to be the mother culture of many other cultures that appeared in the region in the later years. These cultures, such as the Mayas, the Zapotec, the Teonec, and the Teotihuacan civilizations, have unique art, architecture, and cultures that separate them. Still, many historians trace these cultures back to their shared Olmec heritage. Yet slavery was instrumental in developing southern colonies and greatly facilitated the republic's self-sufficiency after the 1771 through 1783 American Revolutionary War. Slaves arrived equipped with the conceptual and technological skills to build their houses. In fact, this is the framework for a square house with a pyramid-like roof, which was also discovered in the grasslands of Cameroon, just before the roof is thatched. In the colonial period, slaves built their own houses from materials provided by the plantation or slave owner. In 1893, 2 archaeologists found slave houses from the mid-1700s. They were narrow, rectangular, single, and double buildings without chimneys. They think that the walls supported steep roofs covered with bark, split planks, or thatching. They've been seen in Jamaica, Haiti, the Barbados, and the rainforests and savanna region of West and Central Africa. At the Caribou Plantation, the hearth and fireplace were outside the houses, just like in West and Central African compounds. Planters bought more Africans than town and city dwellers. Isolated communities allowed slaves to recreate and produce a dominant African culture in South Carolinas. Slave life contained critical elements of the African cultural past, such as cooking and eating one-pot meals, speech, oral tradition, folklore, dances, and ceremonies in the woods, and making art. Slaves had more contact with European and American European because of the increasing immigrants of whites, mostly from Great Britain, France, and the Caribbean. They gradually adapt the style of the Europeans. Slaveholders insisted on housing slaves in English and later American-style structures so that they could match their estates. Coin was an African slave born in the household of the founder of Natchez. She was leased to a Frenchman named Claude Thomas Pierre Montoya, with whom she had a long relationship and 10 children. Montoya later bought Coin and freed her and 5 of their children. Their relationship ended after he married. He gave her an allowance and a tract of land where she located her house. Where her house is still located, I should say. As a free black Creole, Coin, or Maria Teresa, had the most significant number of slaves for a free black person. She had 10,000 slaves on her tobacco and indigo plantation. She had this African house built between 1789 and 1800 for a storehouse, which looks very much like the West African houses with a steep roof, and especially the one that I showed you just a little earlier. However, this was her family mansion, and it was built in 1830. Her slaves built this house from local materials. This type of construction was used in early Louisiana. Slaves built this particular house, as well as what's called the French Creole house, as well as the French Creole plantation.